Rescues are underway after two deadly back-to-back earthquakes hit the country just hours ago. This is what it looks like in Caracas. You see crews there standing around hoping that there are some signs of life in that particular pile. Just minutes ago, the Associated Press reported that at least 32 people are dead and 700 are injured. Those are new numbers. 32 people dead, at least 700 people injured. That is according to the acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, putting out those new numbers. The government declaring a state of emergency. You can see why. The USGS says a 7.2 magnitude quake struck near Venezuela's northern coast just after 6 o'clock local time. Less than a minute later, an even stronger quake, a 7.5 hit, not far from the first one. Homes, buildings have collapsed all over the country. Others badly damaged. Hundreds of first responders and security forces are deploying nationwide, searching for survivors as we speak. The USGS warns that thousands of casualties could be happening here. Thousands. Widespread destruction likely. The extent of the damage is not yet clear. This is video from the airport that was reported, and you see the dust, you see people fleeing, you see the terror. Here is what the president of the country, Delcy Rodriguez, said a little earlier ago.
We have also suspended the metro and railway systems in order to facilitate both rescue operations and the recovery of vital infrastructure. I want to announce that there will be no classes for the remaining days of this week. There will also be a suspension of activities that are not considered essential services.
We go live now to CNN contributor Stefano Pozzebon, who is in Bogota. This is in neighboring Colombia, where he still felt the earthquake. You've spent so much time reporting in Caracas. You have so many sources there. What are you hearing about what's going on right now?
Well, the latest we're hearing from Caracas is this new announcement from the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, who spoke to local radio, saying that at least 32 people have been confirmed dead and hundreds, she mentioned 700 more injured. And she pointed out that this death toll does not include the crucial state of La Guaira, that is the state that is pretty much between the city of Caracas and the Caribbean Sea, just north of the capital on the coast. That is where we know that the impact of this earthquake has been felt the strongest. I was able to speak, for example, with Rodriguez's brother, Jorge Rodriguez, who is also a statesman in the country. He is the president of the National Assembly, pretty much the president of the Congress or Parliament there, and he told me that according to a preliminary estimate, at least 15 buildings have collapsed in that particular state of La Guaira. So that is where they're trying to reach as quickly as possible, providing as many emergency services and first responders there. Delcy Rodriguez, in her last message from two local radio, also said that several countries have already offered to send in some teams of first responders. Among them is, of course, Colombia, where I am. We were able to speak with the unit of first responders from the Colombian government. They are saying that they're standing by and trying to reach Caracas as quickly as possible. Of course, one of the challenges is that the Caracas International Airport in Maiquetía, which is in that particular state, La Guaira, that is being so badly damaged, is currently closed. Jorge Rodriguez, the statesman that I was able to speak with, told me that they hope to be able to open it in the upcoming hours, or perhaps early on Friday. But at the point, as of right now, which is early Thursday morning, that airport remains closed. And a lot of people in Caracas are sleeping outside. For example, I was able to speak with several residents over the last half an hour or so, and they're telling me that they are too afraid to go back into their houses, they're too afraid to go back into their flats. Some are speaking about sleeping in their cars, others in like tents. I mean, as much as you can perhaps sleep or trying to catch some rest after such a dramatic experience like going through those two earthquakes that hit the capital within seconds of each other, 7.2 and 7.5 magnitude. Those were big quakes. One of those people that we were able to speak with was a local resident. This is what they told us.
Fortunately, my family, my wife, my granddaughter, and I were out of the apartment building. When we got back, we saw it was completely destroyed. Luckily, the neighbors managed to save their lives too. What can I say? How many families will end up like this, with destroyed buildings in Caracas? Even though it hadn't happened in a while, Caracas is located in a seismic zone.
Now, this is it's perhaps the strongest earthquake that has been felt in Venezuela in at least 100 years. It's a catastrophe that has really no precedent in the last 20 years and come on the back of the most dramatic economic crisis of a country not at war in recent history. So it's almost creating a perfect storm of a catastrophic condition for death toll to grow further and further. Right now, we are reporting 32 killed by this earthquake in Venezuela. Unfortunately, probably that number is destined to grow much, much higher.
Yeah, but because of that, President Trump has this renewed relationship with Venezuela and is promising United States help. We'll see how much comes of that. And just to clarify your reporting, Stefano, when you said buildings collapsed, did you say 15 or 50?
15. The president of the National Assembly to me on the phone told me 15, 1-5. Delcy Rodriguez, when she spoke to the radio, said dozens of buildings collapsed. It's clearly a preliminary assessment, but we know that that is the area that is most badly felt.
Though we want to bring in William Yak, who is a research geophysicist at the U.S. Geological Survey. Thank you so much for being with us as we continue to monitor live pictures from there. Talk to us about what we know about this earthquake and the sort of back-to-back nature of these massive earthquakes, 7.2 and then 7.5.
Right, so there are these two very large earthquakes that are 39 seconds apart. So the first one likely triggered the second one. And really, when a big earthquake like this occurs, what we're worried about is not just the size of the earthquake, but how shallow the earthquake is and how close it is to dense population centers. And then in those population centers, how fragile the buildings are, what's the likelihood that they could collapse from shaking. So we've seen, examples of buildings that have collapsed. In this case, it was a very shallow earthquake. It occurred close to people. So, it's very worrying, and we expect it to be very damaging. And I think it's going to take days to weeks to really understand the extent of this damage.
Because we've seen a lot of seismic activity around the world just today. We had a report earlier of a 5.6 magnitude earthquake in Northern California, which we have some video of that happening. And then not long after that, we had a report of a quake that was a 6.9 magnitude quake in Japan. And yet both of those quakes, we do not have reports of widespread damage. Talk about the difference in building codes in a place like California and Japan versus Caracas, and how that impacts something like what we're seeing right now.
Right. So we know in the United States and Japan are areas where we have lots of seismic activity, and we have very strict building codes in the United States, and similarly in Japan. I can't speak to exactly the codes in Venezuela, but we do know that unreinforced masonry buildings are likely to collapse, and that's really an example of what we've seen a lot in these images that are coming out. So these are, large masonry structures that can just pancake. And when we talk about the effects of earthquakes, we say, it's not the shaking that kills people, it's buildings that kill people. And it's really the collapse of those buildings that can lead to the catastrophic loss of life.
So in terms of, do we know that of all this activity happening on the same day, is that, some people think, is that connected? Does that all trigger other quakes? Usually the answer is no, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, in this case, the three cases you mentioned, the California 5.6, these earthquakes in Venezuela, and then the earthquake in Japan soon after, are not related. But we do know that earthquakes do trigger aftershocks around their immediate area that can last, days to weeks to months after that main shock. So a large earthquake like this, you can expect to have aftershocks in the region for a long time after they occurred. So people who felt shaking from those earthquakes should expect to feel shaking again in the future.
And that's the real danger also for people in Venezuela right now, that there could be more earthquakes happening at any moment.
just right. We've seen few aftershocks in this specific earthquake. Every sequence is slightly different, but you should always be prepared for more shaking after you've experienced a significant earthquake like this.
I want to go live right now to Caracas. We're joined by Tony Frangi Mawad, who is a journalist based in the city. Amazingly, has internet right now, so let's try to, hopefully this will work. Talk to us about your experience. What were you doing? How did it feel? Walk us through it.
Hi, thank you for having me. I was actually in the elevator of my building about to go and watch a match of the World Cup at a bar with friends. And the moment I got into the elevator started to shake from side to side really strongly and go all the way down on a very quick
Oh my God.
pace. At first, I thought it was just malfunctioning, but my friend was like, "No, this is clearly a sort of earthquake." So we grabbed the long thing that the elevator has until it opened in the basement of the building, and we managed to get out. And there was no signal. Actually, my Wi-Fi is working, but my carrier isn't working. So we went out into the gardens of the building, and all the neighbors and my family started to come out. And when we got some signal and some people managed to connect to some Wi-Fi, we started to see the first reports and messages about major damages in parts of the city.
Have you been able to walk around? What's it look like outside?
Oh, I've stayed in my home all day with my family. We stayed a few hours in the gardens of the building, and then people started to go up again. But I know that in the northern side of the city, where many of my friends live, the damage has been actually widespread, and many buildings have collapsed. So I also know about the coast in La Guaira having major damages. That's a major city near Caracas, where like tens of buildings have actually collapsed. So at least not in my area, the damage is wide, but in areas near Caracas and in northern Caracas, there's report of many buildings, but we don't know yet how many casualties and injured people.
How are you processing this? How are your friends and family processing this?
So at first I was actually very scared because I was calling a lot of friends, especially those that live in those parts of the city that had major damage. Um, but I finally managed to contact all of them, and signals started to come back to some, and also Wi-Fi. So thankfully, all my friends and family are okay. But now at this time, we are opening, the WhatsApp groups or Instagram stories, and people are posting a lot of friends and family that are missing, like their friends and their families that are missing and asking for information. So it's actually becoming a sad hour for Venezuela. It's actually becoming a really sad moment, and I suspect that the next days are going to be really overwhelming for all Venezuelans.
And lastly, just what was that elevator ride like? I mean, that literally sounds like a ride that they have at Disneyland. Just what was going
It
through your
was
head?
kind of like that. It felt like that, but definitely much scarier because the one in Disney, it's a ride, and this one wasn't. So I actually had all sorts of intrusive thoughts at the moment. I started to pray, and I was just pressing the bottom, hoping something would open at some point. But I was thinking about all this stuff I've read. In fact, like a few weeks ago, like a week ago maybe, I read about the 9/11 attacks and how many people died in the elevators of the towers, and I was just thinking like, wow, okay, so what if this falls just like what happened in the towers? So that was my thought going on because I had read about it recently. But thankfully, it opened up and I managed to get out of the building. But the building also thankfully didn't have any major damages. So I'm really
Well,
grateful
Tony,
for tonight that
we're
I'm
s-
safe.
we are so grateful that you are okay, and we're so grateful that you're able to share your story with us, and we're sending you and your family and friends love in this moment of need in Caracas. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.